Across 4 decades and both governing parties, American law has undergone a change of category. It has ceased to function as a boundary condition, a hard wall honored regardless of who holds power, and has become a tunable parameter. In January 2026, federal immigration agents shot and killed 2 American citizens in Minneapolis. Renee Good was shot behind the wheel of her car, and Alex Preddy, a lawful gun owner, was killed after agents wrestled him to the ground. Following the killings, lawmakers refused to fund Immigration and Customs Enforcement without placing specific conditions on how its agents use force. The opposing side refused to accept any conditions, allowing the entire Department of Homeland Security to go unfunded. After 76 days, leadership relented. They funded the entire department except for the enforcement agency. The money was withheld to extract a specific outcome, proving that the oldest budgetary wall, the rule that Congress decides what gets paid for, is entirely negotiable. A boundary is honored even when honoring it is costly. A parameter is honored only while honoring it remains mathematically rational for the people operating the machine. The laws remain on the books. They are simply invoked when convenient and suspended when not, adjusting enforcement and funding until the rule becomes legacy code, present in the source but no longer executed by the running system. This architecture obscures the hands making the choices. The division we experience feels like an act of nature, an inevitable tectonic shift, because the mechanism operates in daylight while completely bypassing public approval. The clearest proof of this slide is the fiscal ratchet, a mechanism implicating the entire governing class across the political spectrum. In 1981, Ronald Reagan cut taxes. Then he raised them in 1982, 1983, 1984, and 1987. The boundary of solvency still required a president to take a politically damaging action. By the following decade, the surplus of the late 1990s was consumed entirely. The annual deficit was run near 5% of GDP during a boom of historically low unemployment. Borrowing shifted from a crisis response to a habit. Solvency is no longer a wall to defend. It is a number you nudge, and every administration has nudged it in the exact same direction, because deferring the cost to a citizen of the future is politically rational for the individual officeholder. The accumulating national debt is the precise financial photograph of an accumulating moral condition. It is the mathematical signature of a governing class that has lost the capacity to recognize a limit. To understand why that specific enforcement funding was worth holding the government hostage for 76 days, we have to look past ideology and examine a market. Most of the agency's detention operations are run by publicly traded companies. In 2025, the GO Group posted a record profit of roughly $254 million, nearly a 700% jump over the prior year, with a revenue projection near $3 billion for 2026. On the company's earnings calls, investors complained that the agency was not detaining enough people. To a shareholder, the 30,000 human beings missing from a projected 100,000 body quota are a revenue shortfall. The second major operator, CoreCivic, saw its profits rise by 70% as its detained population jumped by 60%. The regulatory boundary meant to govern this process is gone. A former private executive from the detention sector now runs the Federal Enforcement Agency, turning the regulated into the regulator. The profit generated in the cell is converted directly into political influence, which then buys the policy that guarantees the profit. Federal contractors are legally barred from giving to super PACs. To bypass this, the capital flows through corporate subsidiaries that the parent company controls but argues do not hold the federal contracts, routing millions of dollars safely around the statutory wall. When a society agrees to treat a category of human being as a billable asset, the taxpayer ends up funding both ends of the transaction, the cage itself and the lobbying required to build more of them. It is tempting to look for a villain here, a backroom cabal steering the machine. The reality is much colder. The GO Group and CoreCivic are roughly 95% owned by institutional investors, with BlackRock standing as the single largest shareholder in GO. Vanguard and State Street sit right behind them. Together, these 3 firms are the largest shareholder in nearly 9 of 10 companies in the S&P 500. It is the problem of 12, a concentration of power where a handful of firms cast about a quarter of all corporate votes. Vanguard has no outside shareholders. It is owned by its funds. BlackRock is publicly traded, and its largest shareholder is Vanguard. They own each other, and both vote shares that were never theirs. The capital comes from the public pension systems of teachers, nurses, and county clerks across a dozen states. The machine caging the stranger is funded by the very neighbors who decry it. These firms overwhelmingly vote with management. They are not a Politburo plotting a course. They are a mass so large it bends the floor of the economy passively, whether or not anyone intends it. You do not need to look up to find the hand on the dial. Look at your own index funds. Your proximity to the pricing of human life is sitting quietly in your retirement account. The absence of a conspiracy is exactly what makes the machine so dangerous. A system owned in microscopic fractions by everyone is a system no one is responsible for. The conversion of walls into dials operates in plain sight at the highest levels of the executive branch. The East Wing of the White House was recently demolished to build a private $400 million ballroom. It was funded entirely by corporate and individual donors who have active business before the government. Within 6 months of donating, 14 of the 27 known corporate donors won new or expanded federal contracts, and 16 saw active federal enforcement actions against them eased or suspended. The single largest donor in that pool, Lockheed Martin, secured over $43 billion in new or expanded defense contracts. The donor list includes the family of the sitting Commerce Secretary, drawn from the financial firm Cantor Fitzgerald, a cabinet member helping fund the private hall while his industry sits under federal regulation. A multi-billion-dollar transfer of wealth slides past as background noise, while a minor personal scandal involving a few $1,000,000 consumes the country. Outrage is calibrated to vividness, not magnitude. We have lost nearly 3,500 local newspapers in 2 decades. That vacuum is filled by a national engagement economy structured to reward what holds an eyeball. The algorithm mechanically magnifies the bright speck and shrinks the enormous structural beam. The press is not secretly commanded, it is captured by incentive. The most consequential takings do not look like theft. They look like legal policy, effectively laundered into the wallpaper of our daily news feeds. While power concentrates at the top, it dissolves into a fog of 50 separate jurisdictions at the bottom until no one is accountable. Nationally funded networks capture amateur state legislatures, passing regressive model bills that immediately preempt any city attempting to raise minimum wages or regulate labor within its own borders. Beneath this, the federal floor evaporates. The 1996 cash welfare block grant, frozen in nominal dollars, has lost nearly half its real value to inflation and population growth. This mechanism turns civil rights into a function of latitude. Broad religious exemptions and gerrymandered districts reduce fundamental protections to a coordinate on a map. The principle organizing internal borders collapses entirely when a restrictive state attempts to reach across state lines to prosecute a doctor or a resident operating in a free jurisdiction. The premise that an American carries a portable floor of dignity has been replaced by a brutal market. Those who can afford to move buy their rights by moving. Those who cannot are abandoned to whichever square of the checkerboard owns them. The reflex is to demand better laws to fix this, but a statute does not enforce itself, and a right cannot defend itself. Every constraint in a human society is written, interpreted, and enforced by a human being who is subject to the exact appetites the law exists to restrain. The macroscopic fracture of the republic is the exact scaled-up replication of a microscopic internal division. The state is breaking as the people. We call it the hedge. It is the learned ability of the operator to privately register an injustice on their internal fairness detector, document an objection for the file, and then publicly comply anyway. The terminal state of this disease is a society filled with privately decent people who are practically complicit in their own undoing. They feel no friction because their conscience has been demoted to a decoration. But there is an asymmetry here. The nation's repair is a paralyzed collective action problem. The individual's repair is entirely within your own jurisdiction, requiring no quorum and no committee. Holding your attention on the unmoving facts of this cycle will not change the story. It simply changes where you stand in relation to it. The immense weight of these broken dials and ledgers was never yours to lift. It is only yours to stop enabling. The harvest our grandchildren reap is being planted this morning, at the next private fork where doing the right thing costs something real, and the choice is unshareably your own.